Good morning, everybody. It's David here. Tamara is putting us on the show. My friend Nina is with us. Hi, Nina. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David. Glad to be here, and thanks, Tamara.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. Where she's taking a break, as is Robbie. We will see them back next week. Today, we're going to have an interesting and exciting guest. His name is Frank Hyman, and he is the author of an essay called "The Confederacy Was a Con Job on Whites and Still Is." And it's been reprinted many times in Southern newspapers. He's been a community organizer and Durham, North Carolina city council member who authored the third living wage ordinance in the U.S. He also managed a successful referendum campaign for affordable housing, parks, and transit that essentially taxed the suburbs of Durham, North Carolina, to the benefit of inner city residents. He works as a garden designer, carpenter, and stonemason. Frank is a descendant from working class whites whose men fought for the slaveholders. Despite having an uncle in the KKK, Frank considers his younger self to have been an inept racist. That's his term. We're going to talk to him about how he has built successful coalitions by addressing people's self-interests. We're interested in how he sees the case for reparations and the arguments that he makes for it. And you can read more of his essays besides "The Confederacy Was a Con Job on Whites." It still is, at a site called medium.com, medium.com. Welcome to the show, Frank. How are you this morning? And
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, David. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Tamara, for having me on. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. It's great to meet you, and Nina. You know, the essay really was quite a breath of fresh air, I guess you'd say. How? Why don't you maybe start off the conversation with something about the? I think it's probably freshest in your mind. Some of your impressions of the essay and the argument that Frank has made in it.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Nina has to say.
Just what sticks out in your mind from it.
Well, about the way that having a group of people who were enslaved suppresses wages for working white people. That's kind of the big thing. And the fact that we still have a version of that. In fact, this morning, as I was kind of rereading the article, what I was even thinking about is this other area of labor that doesn't get talked about. To me, it seems like, you've kind of got salaried employees and hourly employees, but then there's also a category of people who are working for nonprofits. And I started wondering, well, how does that also kind of fit into this idea about labor? And I don't know if that makes any sense to introduce that at this point or not, but these were some things that I was thinking about this morning. And anyway.
So what people who are tuning in might not realize is that this essay first ran in 2015 as a response to all the controversy about the Confederate flag being flown over state houses in the South and other places. And so I wanted to start off by addressing my feelings about the Confederate flag. But the reason that the three of us are talking today, is that somehow spontaneously my essay has started getting passed around on the internet. I had a friend on Facebook who's up in Manhattan tell me that she had read it the first time and loved it, and saw it again recently on a site or some group called Rednecks for Reparations or something like that. So lots of people are running into it and passing it around on Facebook and Twitter and who knows whatever else. And so that's how I guess David and Nina found the essay, that it's kind of been revived, and hopefully that'll continue. But what drove me on it was that my sense about how working class whites in the South especially, but nationally as well, should feel about these issues were, to me, seem very simple and obvious, and seem like the kind of things that kids in history class in high school should be hearing this analysis. This is not, what I've described is not a set of opinions. My entire essay is a string of facts. And so to catch people up who may not have read the essay, basically my point is that to want the Confederate flag to come down because of the effect of the Confederacy and racism on Black people, that's bad enough. But that's not the only problem. That by the Southern slave owners enslaving people and getting essentially free labor, they drove down the value of labor throughout the South. And Southern working class people suffered economically indirectly because of slavery. And so the Southern slaveholders and the people who had money for newspapers and magazines in the South at the time put out this false story that somehow even the Southern white poor people benefited from slavery. But the only benefit they got was just to feel like they weren't that, I may be bad off, but I'm not as bad off as these Black people working on the plantation. That was the only real benefit that they had, such as, if you could call it. But that the economics of slavery wasn't only bad for Black people; it was bad for non-rich white people. And this is important because if we want the white working class or white people generally or Southerners, if we want them to vote in ways that help struggling people, working class, working poor, of white, Black, or people of color, of any sort of folks, then what we need to do is we need to be directly addressing their self-interest. Because when the point of politics is to persuade people. And that seems obvious, but I mention it because I've been doing politics since I was 18, started fighting the Dixiecrat Strom Thurmond in South Carolina 42 years ago. And what was obvious to me even then was that a lot of people, in the way that they did politics, they hoped to win, but they were not interested in developing their ability to persuade. A lot of it was that they wanted to make it clear that they were a better person than the people they were campaigning against. And I can understand that sentiment, but in a democratic society, that it just backfires. And so if you want to make conditions better for working people in America, in the flawed democratic society that we have, then the best thing a person can do is better develop their skill at persuasion, and to develop your able to do is find the other, because people will only change their views, only change the way they vote, do in response to their own self-interest. It's the rare person that's going to change or do something different because they're concerned about some other people. It's just human nature, and we won't be changing that anytime soon. And especially in a culture like America, where, despite it being supposedly a Christian country, as a friend of mine put it when we talked about some right-wing politician who was pro-Christian, all that, my friend says, so is this guy a follower of the kind Jesus or the mean Jesus? We've got a lot of people who are followers of the mean Jesus. And if we want them to vote differently or to see issues differently, we just have to engage their self-interest. And that's what the essay was about. So I was not, I was aiming at people what I grew up with. My childhood started in a trailer park. My mother didn't go to college. My father didn't go to high school. I never made more than minimum wage till I was 32 years old and started my own business. So I was aiming this at the Southern white working class people that I grew up with, many of whom still live in trailer parks, many of whom voted for Trump and think he's marvelous and think he's a gift from God. And so the essay wasn't telling those people, yeah, you need to take the flag down, the Confederate flag down, because it hurts the feelings of Black people. That is not a persuasive argument with this crowd. Instead, the argument was the Confederacy was this false notion that you benefit from Black people being enslaved, which was like, it's just the facts, the numbers do not support that. And all these like sons of the Confederacy who want to say, oh, it wasn't so bad and it was such a good thing for my ancestors to be in the South. It's kind of like, dude, the numbers don't support that. It's like your people and my people may not have been enslaved, but we were pretty much shut down financially. The comparison of land ownership and education and wealth between the North and the South. Yeah, we were white, working class, working poor. We were impoverished because of the downstream effects of slavery. And so that was the point I wanted to make. I want to engage their self-interest because about how the Confederacy affected their families.
Yeah, and
they're not interested. They really are just, most of them are not interested in how the Confederacy affected Black people then or now. That's like not, you won't get much traction with that argument if you're trying to persuade the working class whites. And I'll mention one last thing. So in the when Obama and Romney ran for president, half the working class whites in the rest of the country went for Obama. So Obama and Romney split the working class white vote in all of the country except the Southeast, where like only 1/3 of working class whites voted for Obama, but still 1/3 of working class whites voted for Obama. So there's a huge crowd that I think is susceptible, is open to hearing arguments that address their self-interest and can bring them to voting for better candidates and better policies. So that's what the essay was about.
yeah, that's and the same argument certainly can be applied and has been for the Jim Crow era as well, and for the present moment. Wouldn't you say, Frank? I mean, that's.
I missed part of your question because the screen froze up. Can you say that again?
The same argument applies for the Jim Crow era and right down to the present day. I think we really need to build up a kind of a repertoire of this kind of information that would be a part of the talking points, of any progressive movement in the, that tries to reach out to European American working people in the South. Mm-hmm. I've quoted this before, but it's not really a quote, but it's sort of paraphrasing Martin Luther King, who in his speech after 1965, after the the Selma to Montgomery March, he said that in effect that Jim Crow is a skinny bird on which to feed your family, and I really think that King was really grasping how, I mean, more so than almost anybody that I can see, really grasped how to reach out in the same way that you're talking about both appealing to the, to look at your interests clearly. That I think is is one of the hallmarks of it, not clouded by this fog, of white supremacist illusion, and the illusion of superiority. I think that there's an awful lot of that fog that's surrounding the uh, the folks who are out there who as you said, think Trump is a gift from God. Uh, if there's anything to be learned, it's that the fact that some that who among poor whites who vote, they vote Republican, and African Americans vote Democrat, means that the working class is divided between the two parties, and they can't fight for their own interests. We can't fight for our own interests. So anyway, that's certainly part of the reason why the wages are low, the standard of living is low, the rate of unionization is low in the South. This is pretty much the pattern that exists. I mean, if white supremacy was so good for whites, how come the place where it's most intense is the place where white working people have the worst conditions? And
I'm going to steal that line someday. If I remember, I will give you credit. But I'm 60 years old, so I may not remember that. But
yeah.
Well, that's a good angle. That kind of is in a nutshell kind of sums up my essay. White supremacy was so good for white people, then why does your life suck?
Yeah,
compared to like somebody in New England or the Northwest, or the Midwest. Yeah, but I think that so let me if I could broaden the context of my essay a little bit. Like I said, I started doing politics in 1978 and back in a Democrat, trying to beat Strom Thurmond, which you might not be surprised to hear that didn't work. But in trying to educate myself about politics and how does this work and how do we beat the odds and how do we win victories for working people, and looking at history and reading biographies of leaders like Harvey Milk, Martin Luther King, other folks, one of the sad conclusions I've had to come to is that the left, however you want to define the left in America, but the left has mostly, not always, but mostly been losing since 1968. And I used to say since 1980, but then I thought about it and read some more, and I was like, no, it's 1968 was kind of the turning point. And part of it is that I think that a lot of people on the left become interested in politics. Well, this actually applies left, right, and center. Let me preface by saying just about any critique I make about political activists applies across the board. But if folks on the right are using ineffective policies, I'm fine with that. But when people on the left are using ineffective practices, I would hope better at doing our work. And so going back to the essay, I found that in many cases, people on the left would be campaigning for some issue or some candidate, and really just had not developed their skills of persuasion. They would, the general practice would be, well, I think we need to do this because of what's important to me. And then the election comes and that side would lose. And because most of the activists are middle class, they were pretty minimally affected by that loss. And I felt like I would watch people like pat themselves on the back. Yeah, we fought the good fight. We lost, but we fought the good fight. And I would look at the working poor or marginalized people who can't afford to be losing too many elections or referendums. And they would be suffering from this because the folks who are actively in leadership just did not have on addressing the self-interest of the two important groups. Whenever you're doing a campaign, it's like there's the people in the middle who might vote your way this year and vote against you next. It's like you got to persuade them that what you're doing satisfies their self-interest, not Frank Hyman's self-interest. And then there's the group that may or may not show up to vote at all.
Yeah.
How are you going to engage their sense of self-interest in this? So I wanted to offer, in being on this quest for 42 years of like, how do we win more and lose less for the benefit of working people, some of whom like still live in the same kind of trailer park I grew up in.
Yeah.
So I want to offer a couple things. One is that in a democratic society, which we are lucky to be in one, as imperfect as it is, in a democratic society, the only way to make improvements for working people, for marginalized people, is to put together majority coalitions of imperfect allies. I'm gonna say it again because this is the only, and I'm not a person who's dogmatic or narrow or rigid, but in 42 years of politics, it's like this is like an iron law. Whether you're working, whether you're trying to persuade your neighborhood association or trying to persuade your nonprofit group or your city council or a referendum or a state seat or for president, anything. Victory for working people in a democratic society only come from majority coalitions of imperfect allies. And if you feel like you have time and energy to litmus test potential allies as not being progressive, agreement with you on these 5 issues, but they're on the wrong side of this other issue. Wow, it's just like, oh, they're just not at our level. Like, wow, that's a recipe for what I described earlier, like losing the campaign and then patting yourself on the back for fighting a good fight, but we lost, and you're middle class, so you can survive that. But working class people, they lose out continually because of this, because left, right, and center, a lot of people want to litmus test potential allies. And I'm like, get over yourself. The other thing that I found to be really lacking on the left and contributing to how we've mostly been losing since 1960. So my entire adult life, the left has mostly been losing with rare victories like Obamacare, rare and wonderful victory, but Obamacare is basically a rewrite of a Republican plan to avoid doing Medicare for all. So even when the left has had a victory in America in the last, since 1968, it's a little bit sad. To the coalition of imperfect allies being the only useful goal in a democratic society, the other thing is there's such a lack of skill on the left, right, and center. But if the right is terrible at persuasion, I don't care. When the right is not good at persuasion, that's a problem, and that's one we can fix. And so for those who are watching, I'm speaking to you, the folks watching. I think that would be it, because I think we're going to remember all these things. That's partly the hubris of the educated class to think, oh yeah, we'll remember all these details, but like, no, we won't. That's just being honest with ourselves. So write these 4 things down. If you want to be a more effective activist, then improving your skills of persuasion is like the #1 best thing you can do. And it's 4 simple steps. The first, #1, learn when you're engaging someone and you want to persuade them, you want to persuade a person that they should come out to vote, that they rarely do. Or you want to persuade someone who does vote that they should vote for your candidate or your campaign. The first thing you do when you engage that person is learn how to shut the fuck up. You just have to be quiet long enough that they are comfortable expressing themselves. So that's step one, shut the fuck up. Because in your silence, they will feel pressure to speak and speak and speak. And some of it will be uninteresting blather or contrary to reality, and that's fine. But the important thing is that's fine in terms of being an effective persuader. So shut the fuck up is number one. Number two is like listen without being judgmental, which is a difficult grown-up skill. It's an adult skill. You'll know you're on your journey of adulthood if you can listen to a person who says things you don't believe and don't agree with without being judgmental. I'm not saying I always am able to do that. It's a difficult thing, but it's an important thing if you want to be a persuasive activist who delivers victories to working people. If that doesn't matter to you, then you don't need to listen and you don't need to pay attention and you can just keep running your mouth. Fine. So number two is listening for a long time without being judgmental. That doesn't mean you can't ask questions for clarification, but don't use a tone that like, I'm asking this question because you sound like an idiot. It's just like you are asking because you want to better understand their point of view that you are not obligated to agree with. So that's number two, listen without being judgmental. Because when you're listening, so it leads to number three, that as they are talking about this issue or this candidate or this campaign, they will be, if you're listening, you will hear them expressing their self-interest. And again, you don't have to agree. As David said, a lot of white working class Southerners have this, they don't have a clear sense of what we think their real self-interest is. But sadly, they are not sitting there waiting for us to explain to them what their self-interest is. They have a sense of it already. And this is what they believe. And if you want to be a persuasive activist who delivers victories to working people, you will listen to them express what they believe their self-interest to be. Number four, and this is where it all comes together. As they are describing their self-interest and you are clocking it, you will find that there are places where their self-interest and your self-interest align. It may be a very narrow place, but it's like a skinny little Venn diagram, if people remember that from math class. But there are small places where your group's self-interest and their self-interest will align. And that's your opening. That's your opportunity to say in a respectful way, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and you and I, we know we come from different places, so we're not in agreement on everything, but like, what about this one thing? And that's when you can hook them in, because by you letting them talk without interrupting them or asking questions that help them explain better what their view is, they feel like you respect them, which hopefully you actually do, but they will feel like you respect them and they will share more. And that gives you traction to like bring them over to your side, to persuade them like, yes, here's this one thing that you've told me you care about, and my candidate is delivering that. Campaign will bring you that. And that's how you get them either to show up to vote or you get them to change their vote. And so I wish I had something to tell you that was easier than that, because what I'm describing is not easy.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody here is doing politics.
We've been freezing up. The screen is freezing up
but
a
it's
lot.
it's hard
for that, but I'm not sure, what the technological glitch is here. But
it's because technology is like an overrated thing. If I was king of the world and I could push a button that make the internet die, I would do it now. It's a little bit of benefits. Like I like email. I like watching TikTok, a little bit, but like the little bit of benefit we get from the internet is not outweighed by the horrors it's bringing on us. Trump, China, what they're doing. Yeah, I if I could make the internet go away, I'd be doing this like on a conference call or something, or anyway.
Well,
right, sorry to go on for so long, but those are two important points that have allowed me to deliver victories that people did not expect in my political work.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. But Nina, I just want to say that that I've had many conversations with Nina, and I just find her to be a natural at this kind of thing. Go ahead.
What I would, as I'm sitting here shutting the fuck up so I can hear what other people are saying.
Good for you.
So what I'm thinking about are conversations I've had that were like that, where I have listened a lot to somebody that I don't agree with, and I know I don't agree with, and finding those places where we do have some bit of agreement. Now, I'm not a political activist. I'm good at listening to people, I think, and talking, you know, in a real and sort of authentic way, but I'm not a political activist, so I don't know how to move to that next place. But I think you're right about those two factors being really important. And maybe attached to that, and David and I have actually talked, he's a good pep talker for me, because I'll sometimes come back from a conversation like that and I'll be like, I had this conversation and it just didn't do any good at all. And he'll remind me that I don't know what the long-term effects are of some of those conversations. They may not all yield something immediately. It may be 6 months or 2 years, 5 years down the road.
Yes. Yeah. The downstream effects are who can tell, but also with some people, it won't work.
Right.
And kind of a piece of this, listening skill as a way to persuade is recognizing that as early as possible that some people are not susceptible to being persuaded.
Right.
I can tell you a story about my political education. So I was working on a construction site in godforsaken Kansas in the winter, which I will never do again. Nothing against Kansans. But so there's 7 or 8 of us guys on lunch break, construction workers, and a bunch of them are, so we're in Kansas, but like a third of the crew is Southerners who had to leave the South to get decent wages. This is part of my education in 1981. That like I was an internal migrant worker in my own country, that I had to leave the South. So I had to leave the South where the minimum wage was like $4.25. And I had to go to Kansas to get a $7 an hour wage. And so a bunch of us are Southerners. And one asshole is running his mouth about how easy, black people have it so easy. They get welfare and housing, all these things free. They don't work. Black people got it so easy. And I'm kind of listening to him. And I'm kind of watching the other guys. And they're kind of like nodding, like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so I'm like thinking, how, instead of just saying, well, you're wrong and I hate you and you're stupid, which is like pointless, yes. Right? I think, how do I flip this argument here? How can I do this with some grace and that it doesn't devolve into like a shouting match? And I said, well, can you think of any black person that you actually know that you would, and this is sad, and I apologize for how sad this is. But I said, Frank, is there any black person? Is there any black person you actually know that you would trade lives with them? Would you trade places with any black person you know? Because in my experience, it's like, so I won't go into that. But so I just put that out there. Is there any black person you would trade places with if they've got it so good? Just asking. I'm asking a question. And Mr. Loudmouth, he's like, oh, yeah, I'd trade places with, he named some black rich athlete or somebody. It's kind of watching his reaction. So he's just blathering. He's an idiot. Just a big mouth idiot. He's not susceptible to any persuasion skill that I might have at any point in my life. But I'm kind of out of sight of I'm watching the response of the other guys. Right. And half of them are like, oh yeah, I'd trade places with a black athlete or movie star. And the other half of them are kind of like, I could tell they heard what I said. And they're thinking, yeah, I know black people. I wouldn't trade places with them. They get shit on all the time. And I realized that if you want to be persuasive, you also, because it's hard work, you kind of have to be judicious with your time and recognize that some people are not susceptible. They're just like a loudmouth asshole. And, and if you're talking to somebody like that at a party, you just need to go like, oh, I need to refresh my drink. I'll be right back. And then you just walk away, right? Because life is short. But there are people who are like in the middle, and they're susceptible to some blathering loudmouth idiot, but they're also susceptible to somebody who can gently and calmly put a piece of information out there, who can engage them in Socratic method of like asking a question that then their answer brings them over to our side. So that was a seminal moment for me that like, okay, I want to learn how to be persuasive. Some people it won't work no matter who you are, but some people it will. So spend your time with the ones who can be persuaded. And if you reach a point where you're like, okay, I was wrong, this person can't be persuaded, then like I got to go freshen my drink. I'll be right back, and disappear. Go, take your time, take your energy somewhere else. But keep Nina, that direction and keep honing your skill. I mean, life is about like, developing skills, and especially being politically active. It's like, I'm not being judgmental here, but everybody listening, I'm going to tell you, I want to say to you what I say to myself all the time is I say, Frank, your skills could be better. You need to like find places where your skills are a little bit weak and hone them a little bit to accomplish your goals, whether it's political goals or just like having decent family life that isn't a clusterfuck, or getting along with the people at work. Your skills are not as good as they could be. That's just the human condition. And a person who can look at themselves that way and does not suffer from the hubris of the educated class. And I think everybody watching is probably went to school, went to college. And if you think about it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you realize we have weaknesses and you work on honing your skills, you can be more effective as an activist, as a politician, as a leader, as a family member, as a coworker. So let me put it in that context, that what I'm describing is not just a political thing, but it's like it helps you in your everyday life too. So it seems like
I have frequently used the term, that the motivations of the left are particularly European American, the white left, is to find themselves certificates of innocence, that it's what you were describing, which is it may, the work that you do, may lose, but you feel better because, you feel superior to the people around you. So that's the certificate of innocence. And usually it's authorized by people of color, so you have to be in this deferential position without really having a strategy for winning over the white working class, and if you had a strategy, you would be able to do the work that you're talking about, Frank, which is drawing people along, from places where where you really feel like you have nothing in common with these folks. They use the N-word, they've got the Confederate flag and all of this other stuff. But if you're sitting and listening the way that you talk about, or standing and listening, I mean, I have been in those construction sites. I have been, doing this kind of work. I have been listening as one of these blowhards, starts running off his mouth. And that there are, particularly with guys, this becomes a male thing, that, and I'm going to shut up immediately after I say that, because Nina wants to say something. Okay. And that there are that the other guys that are in the crew or whatever it is. I worked for Con Edison in New York. These crews of five or six guys. And that there are guys that are in that crew who are saying to themselves, "This guy is, just a bullshit artist, and he's just wants to be the center of attention. And there are a lot of people who are the quiet ones, still waters run deep. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Nina, go ahead.
We will now hear from the quiet one.
She is like that. Nina and I have had some conversations with her, and it's true. She does get down. She has these, because she is really, she's talking with people who are outside of the bubble, so to speak.
And there are people that I love and I'm close to, when I don't want to alienate them. So one thing I was thinking was that what I can tell people in general don't want is to feel stupid, so they don't like to feel that somebody is looking down on them, and they don't like to feel that they've disappointed somebody that they love either. And you can either use that in a good way, I don't mean using it nastily, but just being aware of that and letting that shape a conversation, or you can strong arm someone. So everything you were talking about, if this isn't going to sound hopelessly elitist white or something, I've practiced yoga for a long time, like multiple decades. And I think of my body and I think of myself in relation to others in a similar kind of way. And so, like with my own body, when I'm wanting to work at a growing edge, which actually, Frank, is a part of what you were talking about, areas of weakness, then I want to proceed there kind of carefully. I don't want to overstretch.
Right.
Or overload a muscle or something like that. And I think of the same thing in relationship to other people, that when I meet somebody that's like that asshole that you're talking about at the party, that's in effect like my body where I have tried to push too hard. And I'm not going to get anywhere if I just keep pushing. So that's the time to retreat. Then I may find someplace else where, I can work with this a little bit. And where I can feel somebody else's growing edge, I'll respond to that and continue a conversation, even if I find it difficult, even if it doesn't feel like it's leading anywhere. It is hard for me to detach from the fruits of it. I kind of want something that will change somebody's opinion. And so that's another growing edge for me, is knowing that I can only do what I can do, and I can't hold on to too much expectation about a final outcome. I can hope and I can keep working with it, but that's about where I can go with it.
I love that expression, growing the edge.
Yeah.
That's really a wonderful.
Well, you do it in yoga all the time, because it's fine to go up to that place where you can begin to strengthen or become a little more flexible, but you don't want to push too far beyond it, because you'll injure yourself. And I feel the same way about human relationships. I don't want to injure a relationship just for the sake of being able to say I strong armed somebody. That's just not a desirable outcome.
That just backfires.
Yeah, it does.
I just wanted this is just such a wonderful conversation to have, for the purpose of getting an inner center, centering yourself as a person, as an organizer, as somebody with a set of values and principles that you want to spread, to be whatever you want to call it, a light, a beacon, just somebody who practices, what you want to see in others. And I really think that some of the things that Nina, I've learned from Nina, I've learned from you, and from my own experience, is that for working people, European American or people of color, there is an impulse towards solidarity. It's kind of like it's a default. That the white supremacy just kind of short circuits. And if you can it's kind of the Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's the angels of our better nature. We know that there is this sense in which working people understand that they are in community,
Mhm.
and that's how you survive is through community, and the other part of it is that I really think, Frank, that there's a whole bunch of bullies out there,
Mhm.
and many of them.
That's very popular. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very and embodied by Trump, embodied by his whole,
Mhm.
persona,
Mhm.
the core of his being. And but the issue that I have is that in many cases those people pretend to be working class,
Yeah.
those bullies, but in fact they own businesses. It's sort of like what this guy. The sociologist who did the study of the people arrested at the Capitol, found that they're people who make $80,000-$100,000 a year,
Mhm.
the ones who were there. And I don't know if you know this book by Joe Badgin called Deer Hunting with Jesus.
That's a good.
Yeah, have you? I mean, that was really because I went to school in graduate school in Charlottesville at the University of Virginia.
Yeah.
So I was there for a long time, and I was with these people who lived in double wides and all of that other stuff. I mean, and it just really resonated with me that he was talking about people he went to high school with, and some of them were successful, and the ones who were not were being hired by these folks, to mow their lawns, to do their and whenever they would talk, the Fox News talking points, there would be a deference to them, and he has a number of scenes in which they're sitting around in a bar, and the one guy who is the car owns the car dealership,
Mhm.
is the one who's doing all the talking,
Mhm.
and I see that as the class struggle, and bringing the class struggle home, within the white, so-called white community, you know, um, and the working class whites don't have any their solidarity is undermined by this the proximity of the bullies.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense about that, but I'm getting at something that I think may be the key to how we're going to be able to win the South. I mean, if 1/3 of whites in the South voted for Obama, and if they consistently vote with people,
Working class.
yeah, working class whites, if they consistently did that instead of staying home, which is what most of them are doing, the South could be transformed between the mobilization that has been taking place, particularly among African Americans and people of color, with that added factor. I mean, the South could be what it had the potential to be during Black Reconstruction, and at other key moments during the mass mobilizations of the Great Depression. There were all sorts of moments, when in historical moments when whites were on the edge, and it was really the failure of leadership more than anything else that wasn't able to push it all the way through. So
Mm.
that's my take. Yeah,
I
Nina.
kind of something that we're talking about this or those kind of skills. And I was realizing, isn't that essentially what Martin Luther King Jr. did as part of the civil rights and about nonviolent resistance, of teaching people the skills to stay centered in themselves and not to react too much. I mean, really what you're kind of advocating for is an equivalent of that in appealing to white people who are suffering because they're not making very much money and they don't have healthcare access that they need, and lots of other, services as well. Anyway, just it was something that struck me as y'all were talking.
No, a good point to bring up. I know one of the things y'all want to talk about is reparations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I support reparations,
Me
but
too.
I have a lot of questions because a lot of the people I associate with, and we talk politics, it's for a lot of those people, their contribution is that they talk about politics in informal settings. They're not really activists. They're not really figuring out how do we win on these tough issues. And I've always been, I feel like politics kind of happens at this abstract level of we want to accomplish these abstract goals, but they only get accomplished if somebody figures out the nuts and bolts, where the rubber meets the road. Sorry to be using all these, phrases, but so to me, it's like, okay, so reparations, so I mostly have questions about it. So, and I understand the concept. I understand what Germany did. I understand what we did for the Japanese Americans with World War II. And so I kind of want to hear, so a pro reparations person, I kind of want to hear what would they say going door to door in a trailer park full of poor white folks to explain to them how the reparations thing is going to work, or a trailer park full of Hispanic people, or a neighborhood of Asian American people. And I'm not saying that to be antagonistic. I'm generally like, how are we going to package this? How does this get marketed? How does it get presented? So
good morning, Frank.
Good morning. So
I couldn't help but jump in on this.
Let me wrap up, and then I'll because I want to hear, how would you put together a majority coalition of imperfect allies to somehow tax somebody so that there's the money to provide reparations to some folks, but not all folks?
Immigration.
Okay, I'm listening.
Immigration into this country is hurting us who are foundational white Americans, those of you that are foundational white Americans, and those of us who are foundational Black Americans. We're bringing others in to do work in this country that we could be doing ourselves, but we bring in others from other countries to do it, and that hurts poor working white Americans. Those are jobs that, and we agree, those of us who are descendants of slaves in this country, who are foundational Black people in this country, we agree with white people there that immigration is hurting us.
So how does that help put together a majority coalition of imperfect allies to put some kind of reparations program in place? I'm not following you. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not following how that answers that question.
So you're asking, how do we, if we agree that immigration hurts those of us who are foundational Blacks, those of us who are descendants of slaves, and those of you who are foundational whites in this country, reparations will stimulate this economy, because first of all, how much do you understand about reparations? Because I really want to meet you where you are, and I don't want to get off track. How much do you actually understand about this justice claim and why this is important?
Yeah, I don't think there's just like one sense about reparations, where the money comes from and where it goes. And I think there is agreement that it would be in response to African Americans descended from folks who were enslaved and suffered from Jim Crow and other things. But I don't think there's one sense about like how we make that happen. And I see the benefits if some person gets a check because of the reparations program, some other person or business or whatever pays tax money to do it. I'm curious about. I understand the abstract idea of it, but as a political activist and as an elected official who had to get things done, who had to author and pass a living wage ordinance that a lot of people did not agree with in the 90s. This was a long time ago. One council member, I said, we need a living wage ordinance. He didn't even understand what I was saying. He thought I said a leaving wage, like severance pay, because living wage was not even a term that most people knew in the 90s. And yes, the cost of racism is more than the cost of reparations. I hear you. I agree with you. You're not answering my question. How do we put together an actual winning majority coalition of imperfect allies who vote for this so that their representatives and senators vote for it, and then the president doesn't veto it? And I'm not saying that to be difficult. I'm just curious, like, has somebody analyzed a pathway that gets us there? Because if you don't analyze some pathway or several pathways,
so let's go. Let me try to figure. Let's try to hash this out. And this is actually we're about 5 minutes before our broadcast actually ends, and I think this is where we're going to bring you back and bring in some and really have a more robust conversation.
Sure.
But here's my talking points to Republicans, and so I'm just going to assume that these are the people that you're talking about because they're probably not Democrats.
I don't think every Democrat is on board. Every Black Democrat is not on board with reparations.
Oh, pretty much. Yes. They may not. They may have questions. And see, here's where we'll have to educate you and bring you along to reparations. Black is all encompassing. I didn't say Black. I said those of us who are descendants of slavery. Everybody that's Black in this country is not a descendant of slavery in this country. So there's different. We have to differentiate sift this out, because Black is not all encompassing when it comes to reparations. Those who are to receive reparations in America, those of us, we are descendants of slavery in America. We didn't migrate from other Caribbean countries or other countries around the world. We're foundational Black. Those of us who are descendants of slavery, we are foundational Americans, along with the foundational white Americans that I believe you're talking about. So here's my talking point to Republicans. I always talk about how reparations will stimulate the economy. Okay, we're not going to take reparations, whether it be cash payment or whatever comes of this, and put it under the mattress. This will stimulate the economy. So that is where I take the conversation to dollars and cents. I talk about how it will lower their tax burden, how we could reallocate these dollars that are spent in social programs, how we could reallocate those dollars to a reparations package. So that is where I meet my Republicans. But this is why this conversation is so important this morning. And I thank you for joining us on this broadcast. And we definitely have to have you back for part 2 of this, because this is like just part 1, and we've opened up something here that we have to finish.
I agree.
But reparations and David has struggled with this. David and Nina David has been doing this work for 40 years, and he's still trying to reach working class white people with the message that I think you brought today. And now I think that's part 1 of your work as white people. That is part 1 of your work. Now, part 2 is the work that you will have to do with us, those of us who are foundational Black people in this country, those of us who are descendants of slavery. How do we, for the sake of these are not the best words to use, but how do we make America great? And that's what they stand on. These are the people that you're talking to. This is what they stand on, making America great. They love Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So how do we those of us who are foundational Black people who are descendants of slavery, how do we work with you who have been doing this work to try to get white people to understand that, like you said, the Confederacy was a con job, and it still is. That's the first part of your work. The second part is bridging with us and how we save America together. And I think that is where we're going to stop today. I would love to have you back next week. I don't know if your schedule will permit so that we can do part 2 to this, because I think this is going to
do what I want,
and it's going to be a bigger conversation.
I'd be happy to come back. Thank you, Tamara.
We can't hear you. Let me mute everybody. I'm gonna mute everybody's mic so we can hear you make your comment. 1 second. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would be happy to come back, Tamara. That would be delightful. And I'm self-employed, so I can do what I want.
We still are not hearing you. Try it again. We're having a lot of technical difficulties. That's because I know this conversation is that good. Go ahead, try it again.
Yeah. No, this conversation is good. I'm enjoying it, and I'd be glad to come back. I'm self-employed, so you tell me when, and I can be there. I can do what I want when I want. So
I think it's I might be a conspiracy theorist this morning, but there's a conspiracy for us not to hear you. I need you to nod. Yes, you'll come back next week. Yes. Thumbs up. Yes. Thumbs up. Next week, this conversation is going to get bigger. We're going to bring in some activists. We're going to bring in, and we're going to talk about reparations. And we're going to talk about, like I say, this is part 2. That'll be a part 2, because what I think like I said, you've done all your life, and David has been doing, and Nina's been doing. You've been having the conversations with white people about, like you say, the Confederacy was a con job on white people, and still is. Now, how do we bridge that with those of us who are descendants of slavery in this country? And we actually have a conversation where we meet them where they are with making America great. I think that's where we start next week. That's what we're going to title it too. How do we make America great? Because I think that's going to bring a lot of people over here to listen. We need white people to hear. We need white people to hear, and we need Black people to know how to help do this work. Because there's a lot of hurt and a lot of anger that lives inside of us for what we've been through. So this is where we bridge that divide. This is going to be really good next week. We look forward to having you. David and Nina, what an awesome broadcast. David, I don't know where you found this man, but he's a godsend. We thank you for coming, because I know how big and how good this conversation is about to get. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Every week we give voice to issues, activists, and activism. Please support our broadcast. Go to the website, tamaraforgeorgia.com. You can Cash App us, the Tamara for Georgia. This is where we do the work. This is the real work, and these are the real conversations. And this is how we win in America, and this is how we get it right. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. You can find me, of course, tamarashealy.com. That's tamarashealy.com. Miss Robbie Caban is not with us this morning, but you can always find Robbie at robbiecaban.com. We look forward to next week's broadcast. I know it's going to be a good one. I'm super excited. I'm going to promote it all week because I already know the audience is going to be like on fire. So thank you guys for joining. David, thank you for bringing him in.
Yeah, Frank, give us your contact information as well.
Yeah, just my name. My website is frankhyman.com, Hyman, frankhyman.com. And that has links to my essays and photos of my work if you want to see tree houses and stone walls and fun things like that. So it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Frank.
Thank
you, Nina.
My pleasure. Bye.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week for part 2 of this. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. See you next week, everybody.
All right. Bye.